I'm looking forward to today's topic as well. And as Holly did, I would encourage you to ask questions because I think you're going to have some as we go through this. We're going to really talk about millennials because we're still recruiting them and Gen Z. And then we're really going to talk about the differences between the two and also some takeaways, which is really important when we do these types of webcasts, that you have something to walk away with, go back to work with, talk with your peers about, etc. So we made sure to have that as well. So this is our agenda. It's pretty simple, but I want to kind of make sure we have a baseline understanding or a knowledge of millennials, and then we'll get into Gen Z and do the same thing a little bit deeper into Gen Z. And at the bottom of that agenda, you're going to see Contact William. I can be a resource in case you have questions both during the webinar but after the webinar. So I'll give you all my full contact information at the end. So let's get into millennials and what makes them tick and how we recruit them. And again, some of this is going to kind of make sense because we've been recruiting millennials for a while now. And something shocking, or for me at least, is to think that the oldest millennial is almost 40. So let that sink in for a second. It seems like we've been talking like millennials are, in their teens and barely out of Pampers. But truth be told, they're much older than you think. They're in mid-management, leadership, ownership, founding, and so they're advancing their careers. It's different, and I think that's well documented that it is different than maybe Gen X or baby boomers. But we're going to. It's funny that they don't really define generations. So as you study generations, there's about 19 different ways that people will define them. So I wanted to make sure that we had a working definition of what we talk about when we talk about millennials, and also when we talk about Gen Z. Excuse me. So this is 1980 to 1995, and that's your youngest and oldest. That's the range of people that you're recruiting, and kind of your general principles of recruiting this group of people. And these are all things that you already know. I'm hoping that to them, transparency means something. They like actionable and brutal feedback. They want to know. They want to know in the recruiting process about career pathing, which is interesting because that's different than Gen X. Career pathing was something that you dealt with more or less after onboarding. Once you were there for a while, then you kind of started talking about that. Millennials care about training. They care about praise, which might seem a little odd to you, but it kind of comes in a form of in a lot of different ways. Praise can be recognition, both public or private. It can be you're doing a great job. It can be your total reward system. So it can be fancy and software and systems and process, or it could be just something as simple as just telling people they're doing a good job. But they do want praise. They want to know that you have. It's going to sound funny when I say it, but it's like a praise program. Like, what's your bit? How do you go about, doling out praise? And they'll ask in the recruiting process about that, which throws people off. And for this group, millennials, they're, we've evolved as recruiters through years of using different technologies. So this is not anything new, but this group or audience, if you will, isn't afraid of text. Like if you sent me a text about a job, I'd probably delete it. I'd probably block it, actually. I'd go further. But this group of people, millennials, texting isn't a big thing, and they're kind of accustomed to it, so it's no big deal. So let's get into some of these just a little bit deeper. Transparency and feedback. So they want to know, and they'll research, but they want to know about the job, the company, the hiring manager, the boss, the founder. They want to know a lot of things, and so and they're decent at research, and so being able to, as a hiring manager or recruiter or a sourcer, being able to talk about in a transparent way about the company and the job is extremely important to millennials. Feedback, again, they really, really desire feedback. They kind of thrive on feedback, actually. And so it's our job to provide them feedback. And so this really affects recruiting in a major way, because we need to be able to be set up to give every candidate that we interact with feedback. And that's not easy. There's no kind of easy way of going about that. But that's what their expectation is, and they thrive on it. So we should do a better job at doing feedback. It should be core to what we do in recruiting for millennials. Career pathing and training, as we talked about, and you'll see this kind of what's next mentality. Again, in the interview process, millennials will routinely ask, hey, this is cool, like the job, I think it's going to fit, I think I could do it, I think I could thrive. What's next? Like, what would I do after this? Which might seem rude on some levels, but it's not. That's just a normal question. They're like, well, I'll do this, but what's after this? And as a recruiter or hiring manager, if you can't answer that question, you're shooting yourself in the foot, and it's going to be hard for you to recruit kind of your top talent because you don't have a plan of internal mobility, career pathing. You can call it a lot of different things, but what's next is kind of a simple way of thinking about it. And that's every position. That's entry level, mid, leadership. It doesn't matter where they're coming in from. And again, your oldest millennials are nearing 40. So it doesn't matter where they come into the organization. They're still going to want to know what's next. Training, they've got a pretty good bit. They got a pretty good idea of what they're good at. The question becomes, for recruiters, are you going to help me work on my strengths and make my strengths better? Or are you going to fill in some of my weaknesses? Are you going to help me develop skills? If I want to learn Java, are you going to put coursework in front of me? So it comes in the forms of many types of questions. But what they care about is getting better. And that's not a bad thing. It's just they actually will ask those questions instead of a year into the job or 2 years into the job. They'll ask that question before they take the job. As a prerequisite to taking a job, they will ask about training. So you have to be prepared to answer in-depth training skill development questions, or you just won't get that talent. Praise and texting, again, it's one of these things, they're going to ask you about it, and they're going to use different ways of forms and questions, or sentences in which to do so. But what they really care about is that the organization cares, has an institutional philosophy or ethics or value system that rewards people and recognizes people that are doing a good job. I would say on the positive side, it's funny because a lot of the praise that you see is praise systems. They're not necessarily built for critical feedback or constructive criticism. They're more or less built for positive reinforcement and positive praise. As a Gen X person, I'm accustomed to receiving or doling out criticism. I have 2 arts degrees, so criticism is natural and normal for me. So it is kind of interesting. Everyone's built a little bit differently, and generations are built a little bit differently. And I think even within the generations, there's all kinds of different slices that one can make. But they do tend to care more about positive praise and recognition. So, you know, you probably already know that, but if you don't, that's one of the things you're going to get asked those types of questions in the recruiting process. Again, like we talked about, texting. Again, you know, there's a whole kind of line of thought around texting with candidates, and I've actually got a presentation on it. It's on YouTube or SlideShare. I can't remember, maybe both. But it's basically texting etiquette, and you can get, first of all, they expect it, and you can kind of get to the point in a real positive, create a great candidate experience, and do it through SMS. Now, the millennials kind of expect you to interact with them through SMS. And they don't mind it. It's not a big deal. The life won't end or any of those types of things. But there is an etiquette. There is kind of right and wrong, and ways to do it, ways not to do it, etc. So I think, as it says in the solution there, you know, framing up how they want to be communicated with is a great question to ask, even from a sourcing, you know, once you start the process of finding the talent, marketing to the talent, and then in recruiting and hiring, you know, just always kind of touch base and say, how do you like communication? You want to use email? You want to use text? What's good for you? And being adaptive as a recruiter to kind of meet them where they are. If they want to do everything over text, great. If they want to get on the phone and talk with you, great. Like, it doesn't matter. But this is definitely a group of people that prioritize text over voicemails. If you would kind of take the two and kind of like the voicemail for Gen X, that's normal. I usually delete mine, but but normal. And so just kind of keep that, meeting them, you know, consultants say this phrase, meeting where the rubber meets the road, which, you know, sounds really cheesy, and it is really cheesy. But there is something underneath it that actually makes sense. It's meeting people where they are rather than making them come to where you are. And I think especially in a candidate-driven market like we are in today, it's even more important to meet people where they are. So the key questions that they ask, and kind of these are, you know, and not kind of an importance level, but it's something to think about in preparing your hiring managers and preparing your recruiters to ask questions of you know, we have our set of questions that we're going to ask the candidate. Like we got a battery of interview questions, so we know what questions we're going to ask them. But what questions are they going to ask us? And being prepared for that and having an understanding of the drivers of why they're asking the questions they're asking is just as important. So that what next question, it's important to them to see that you have a plan. It isn't necessarily important as to what the plan is, if that makes sense. But the fact that you have a plan. Like if you can't answer a simple question of, okay, there, you know, you want me to be an account manager, and usually account manager, 18 months, that's cool. I got it. You know, I think I'll really do a great job at the position. What's after account management? If you can't answer that question, they won't tell you, hey, you know, I'd really like the answer, or, you know, this is kind of a deal breaker for you. They'll just move on. They're not going to give you feedback. That's the thing. They'll just move on. They'll stop answering your calls and deleting your emails. So you've got to have. In fact, I tell people, hiring managers and recruiters, to tell me preemptively, like, just get there before they even ask. Hey, you know what? Here's the deal. I want to talk a little bit about, you know, where you're going to go through this organization, and how that kind of works. With success comes options. Okay, so blah blah blah. So the what's next question, very important for your folks to be prepared for. The skills, how will you develop my skills? They expect that, millennials expect that corporations, you know, build their skills. and that's a little bit different. We've gotten away from that in years past, but they come to the table, the recruiting table, and they want to know about how you're going to make them better. So again, I think the best route is preemptively get in front of that and say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to look at your skills, and we're going to talk to you and frame up a plan, a learning plan that basically, if you want to build out your skills, your strengths, we're going to do that. And here's the plan. Here's what we do there. And like even showing them talent technology. Like I've seen recruiters actually crack open LMSs and content and show people like, hey, listen, we're serious about training, like day one. And what there's a process there, if you want to think about it, that when you're sourcing a candidate, you talk to them kind of for the first time, you can find out what they want to learn. And during the recruiting process, you can kind of ask them and, validate, on some level what they want to learn. And then in onboarding, you put them on the plan. So they're kind of connective tissue for millennials. They want to know that you've got a plan of making them better, and then you'll actually do it. So there's that. So the last question, of course, is the question around praise and recognition. I think everybody likes to be recognized. I mean, duh. Who doesn't like a pat on the back? We all have different ways that we take feedback. I'll give you my because I'm deeply flawed. So I'll go ahead and start with myself. I only react to negative solicited feedback. So let me break that down for you. Feedback can only come in four ways. It's really literally a box of positive and negative and solicited and unsolicited. So those of you that are actually scratching this out on a piece of paper, on one axis you put positive and negative, and the other puts solicited or unsolicited. I don't really react well to positive feedback. and every time I say that out loud, I remind myself of how deeply flawed that sounds. But I just don't. Like I take IQ points off when someone tells me I did something well. Like I know if I did it well. I don't need that. But everyone's wired differently, and so if I don't solicit your feedback, then I don't want your feedback. Period. End story. And when I solicit your feedback, I want criticism. So that's me. So everyone on that 2x2, everyone's got something different going on with recognition and praise and feedback. So finding out what's important to people. Millennials tend to be more on the positive and both solicited and unsolicited, but more on the positive. So they just kind of tend to be that way. But just remember, like everybody likes some form of praise. It's not like totally unique. Another thing to think about with millennials is the way they search for jobs. The way that they've kind of come to the job search era is the first thing that they do is they find a job. Usually it's a recommendation made by someone else, one of their friends or buddies or colleagues, etc. They kind of show them something, and then they start doing some research. So they Google the job, they Google the company. They just start going in, and you can call it stalking or research or whatever you like, but they Google and they're into the O's on positions and people that contact them. So a recruiter contacts them, they're going to look you up. They'll look you up on Facebook, LinkedIn. And start looking around and seeing like what you're made about. And then once they do that and they feel like they've satisfied that, again, that's a go-no-go decision. If in their research on Google they find too much about you that just trends in a way that doesn't seem to align with their value set or what they want to get out of life or whatever, then they just kind of move on. But then the next thing, if it is a go decision, then they go to Glassdoor. And this is not because Glassdoor is a sponsor of this webinar. I've actually talked about this for some time now. They go to Glassdoor, and what they're looking for, generally speaking, millennials are looking for about 80-20, 70-30. So not 100% positive, They don't believe that. Like when they look at a company and it's 100% positive, they don't believe it. They actually run away from that company because they know that that's just not true. No company's perfect. No person is perfect. We all have flaws. We've all made mistakes. And so they know that it's been, washed. And so they bolt. And on the other end of that, they know that if it's 100% negative, they also know that that's not true. So they know that it's got to be a blend. And what they're looking for is, 80%, 70% of it being positive and, 20, 30% of it being, real. And real can come in the form of a lot of different ways. It's, like I remember years ago talking with people at Rackspace, and they were like, hey, man, we work 100 hours a week. We skate on the weekends. We drink Mountain Dew, and we code in the dark. And that's what we do. That's it. Like, you want to do that? Cool. You don't? Cool. like that would come across, in a way, like that could be negative for some. So it could be something in your employer brand that actually repels. And I strongly believe that a great employer brand both attracts and repels simultaneously. And so it attracts the people that you want to attract, and it repels the people that you don't want to be there. Anywho, so they do the go no go on Glassdoor, and then after that they go further. They go into LinkedIn, and it's because in LinkedIn search you can look for former employees, and it's really really easy to do. They'll look up the company. They'll go for former employees, and they'll send a couple messages out. Hey, I'm looking at a job at this company. Would you recommend it? And it's kind of like an NPS type of question. They're not writing master's thesis when they reach out to these folks. They're really just trying to gauge, what was your bit with them? Did you leave on a positive, note, and would you recommend them to someone else? And again, this is like restaurants. This is like hotels, and they're going out and trying to really kind of get a real view of your company. And that's all of those three things are all before they apply. And so knowing that and understanding that, makes you, when you're recruiting millennials in particular, really think about what's in Google, think about what's in Glassdoor, think about what's in LinkedIn, and how to bridge a gap with former employees. In fact, I've said publicly a few hundred times that the alumni portion of the employee experience is just as important as the candidate experience. What we do on the back end when we part ways with people is critical, because their people are going to talk to them, and in some ways we should want them to talk to them. So that's a kind of a sum up and a nutshell of recruiting millennials and kind of what they're all about. And again, questions. I love questions. I actually love being interrupted, oddly enough. And so before we jump into Gen Z, if there's any questions, it's great. If not, we're just going to go forward. And the Gen Z, want to again kind of agree on terms, because these things can be relatively flexible, and they're not defined even in Wikipedia. They're not as defined as you'd like for them to be. So a generation is about 15, in some cases 20 years. So that's essentially what a generation is. And so if you say 1980 to 95, and 95 to 2010, and again, you can kind of have people that blend over, that kind of have some of the traits of both. Again, this is, I don't think generational studies are really hard science, but the reason that we wanted to do this webinar and we want to talk about this topic is, look at the oldest of Gen Z. They're coming out of college, and so they're entry level. This is your college recruiting program. This is everything that you do on the very front end of your recruiting process. You're now interacting with Gen Z. And so understanding both the similarities and differences and the nuances with Gen Z is important because, as we know, it's common sense. Each generation is a little bit different. And so I'm looking at the bottom number, and it's 8 years old. It's funny. My youngest son is 9 years old. And so he's literally at the very end of that bit. So I wonder if he'll consider himself Gen Z or whatever the next generation's called him. All right, let's talk about Gen Z. Here's kind of 5 buckets that I really want to kind of go deep into. And it's digital, visual, entrepreneurial, kind of a blurred life, and individualistic. And we'll go into those in just a second. But I want to kind of talk about what makes them tick, because I think if you have a better rendering or a better idea of what makes them tick, then you'll do a better job of marketing, in your recruitment marketing efforts. You'll probably do a better job of finding the talent, your sourcing efforts. But also once you found them, marketed to them, and they apply, and you're starting to recruit them, knowing kind of what makes them tick is it's a game. And again, so like every game, it's a game worth winning for that talent. And it, we shouldn't be blindsided, but I think we are. I think a lot of our peers are blindsided by the fact that we're already recruiting Gen Z. The college folks know it. All the college recruiters know it, but I don't think it's mainstream yet. So, without further ado, let's get into digital. So I'm gonna leave these slides up a little bit longer because there's a depth to them that I really want to kind of get into. These are digital natives. These are kids. That sounds bad. let me erase that. These are people that grew up on the internet and can't imagine a world without the internet. So all the things that make digital and social, the love of those things that we have, that's all they know. They don't know anything different. And it's kind of a funny story. My niece, we were talking, I don't know, probably a couple weeks ago, and I said something about Facebook, and she said, I'm kind of on it. I don't know, whatever. And I said, well, I like the desktop because I can see this, that, and the other. She's like, there's a desktop version? Like she didn't even know. She just thought it was an app. Like there's a Facebook app, and you download it, you do your bit, it's on mobile, and like there's nothing else. And so just that alone, that they have just grown up downloading apps, downloading skins, in Fortnite. That's normal. That's not extra credit. I really like the ability to multitask. That actually really struck me in doing the research, is that because they grew up in a digital world, they've had many tabs open all their life. And so being able to kind of go in and out of things and having conversations, I mean, these, this, empirically or, anecdotally, because, people are on their phones, staring down at their phones, texting and talking to you. And that really is multitasking. They're doing 2 things at once, 3 things at once. So they're better at it than previous generations because that's all they know. The other thing about skills that are really, really interesting, because they grew up in a digital world and technology all around them, they may lack some soft skills. Like they might not look you in the eye, which is strange for some, but they might be accustomed to looking at their phone, and that just might be normal for them. Like yeah, you're talking, I'm listening to you, and I can listen to you without looking at you, and that's normal. And so that's also something to think about in the recruiting process, and not be perturbed by. these are people that have done all these things at a young age. You know, I've told people before that I think my kids talk to Siri and Alexa more than they talk to my wife and I. So it's just normal. You know, Siri, what's the weather tomorrow? You know, like they don't even go to Google and put in weather. They just ask you know, Siri or Alexa, and that's normal. And so what do we do? How does that affect us as recruiters? Like, what are we doing to then capture their attention? Because their attention, and we'll get to it later, but their attention and attention span is different. And the way that they go about progressing in life and traversing things is different. So the first thing I want to talk about is digital, but I want to talk about visual as well. They are extremely visual. And again, these things are kind of interconnected. There's some connective tissue between digital and visual. Because they've grown up on the internet, they've grown up on YouTube. They've grown up on Instagram and Pinterest and Snapchat, and there's tons of apps and games that just are super, super visual. And just think of like the games, like take a game from 2018 and a game from just 2000, and it's not even fair to compare the two. So just those types of things are extremely visual. They have a visual acuity and a memory that previous generations don't and have, because they grew up on the internet. And the thing, again, being digital natives, they're really great at internet research, better than previous generations. And so this affects us in a multitude of ways, but one of it is we talk about being authentic and genuine in the recruiting process. And I don't think any brand is really great at it. I think there's brands that do a better job, but I don't think anyone's really great at it. But these are folks that can sniff out inauthentic really quickly. And a lot of it has to do with their skills, technical skills and research skills. So how does that impact the employer brand? Well, it impacts it in a way that we can't whitewash things. If CEO has been fired for sexual harassment, while it might not be one of the things we want to put on the career page, we've got to be able to talk about it, because it's going to come up. So that's something that's really important. It's not just transparency, but they're going to find out the negative things about you, your hiring manager, the boss, the company, the brand. They're going to find those things out. They're just going to find them out. And so even different than millennials, it's going even deeper into the employer brand, where I think we're going to get to a place where we're going to be forced to be authentic. Like that transparency, while we might have looked at that as optional, it isn't optional, not with this group. So the visual part of that is they want to see your culture, and they want to see other people like them. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. This generation, extremely entrepreneurial. And a lot of that is just because of the way that they've came up, and through the internet, they've seen kind of things explode on the internet. And, Candy Crush, boom, Minecraft, boom. And they've seen things, just out of nowhere, things just, develop an app, a program, something, you release it, a product, you release it, people like it, and then off it goes. So that what's interesting about that from a recruiting perspective is showing them that there's still a way to interact with the company and be entrepreneurial. And so it forces us as recruiters and hiring managers to think, hey, these people, they really are entrepreneurial. They're thinking about it because that's kind of what they know. That's all they know. A lot of their parents are entrepreneurs, things like that. So like giving them a way into the company and then saying, oh, by the way, listen, we want your ideas. We want, if you want, we'll have programs. We'll spin things out. If it's a great idea, we're going to throw research dollars at it. We're going to take it to market, and we want you to lead it. Like giving them an idea that once they enter, there's still a way to be entrepreneurial, even within kind of a large box. And I think it's going to force us to be a little different as we interact with them, because that's not a normal conversation for recruiters. I'm recruiting you for a job. You're going to sit at the desk and do a bit, and that's that. Now we have to actually talk to them about, hey, I understand that you have ideas. You have ideas right now that you want to talk about. And we want to action those ideas. And we have processes, and we have people, and we have budget. We have things in mind and in line to then help you develop as an entrepreneur inside this company. And so that's going to make us, and it forces us to think differently about how we attract this generation to our jobs. And, of course, they're looking at options and different work styles and work options. They want the kind of the job to fit around them rather than them fit around the job, which is a bit different for us as well. The blurred part is you just kind of already kind of get this because, again, getting back to digital natives, and this is a group of people that have never not dealt with or interacted with the internet or had the internet. That's blown away all the lines that used to be there. There used to be kind of a line between business and pleasure. Okay, well, there's no, for this generation, there is no line. And so they not only know that these lines, to some degree, that those lines don't exist anymore. They thrive in that environment, which is also something to think about as we recruit them. They thrive in a blurred environment. They can consume ambiguity better than previous generations because they grew up with ambiguity. So now that forces us as recruiters to think about, okay, this is a person that doesn't really have a work-life balance. It's work-life. It's actually the same. The two things are one coin, two sides of one coin, if you will. So you have to think about how they've grown up. And again, a lot of it gets down to, how they came up. They came up in a blurred environment, and they're comfortable in a blurred environment, and they thrive in a blurred environment. Okay, well, what do we do to put them in a blurred environment, like thrive in that environment? Lastly, one of the things I really want to kind of cover on Gen Z is they are more individualistic than any previous generation. And everything for them comes down to personalization. Everything. Like and it sounds, and again, I don't want to make it sound negative because it's just the way they grew up. And the way they grew up is the world kind of revolves around them and their personalization. And this gets to all the technology that we use, consumer technologies that we use, but everything's kind of fit around them, and that's what they're accustomed to. So what do we do to recruit them and have an experience? Now this gets to candidate experience, employee experience, alumni experience, all the experiences that we care about, which are really based loosely off customer experiences in other markets. But what do we do to actually make them have a great experience that's personalized to them? Like it's a fingerprint to them. There's your fingerprint. It's just for you. How do we do that? And by and large, this hasn't been a challenge for us because we've been able to do things in mass. And we've been able to send an email to 78,000 people about something and, get a decent response rate. That with this group, with this generation, that doesn't work because they sniff it out. They sniff out that this is obviously not speaking direct to me. You're not speaking to me. You're speaking to a bunch of people, and so I'm not going to respond. And so I think this is one of those deals that, like in the recruiting process, when you bring them in, how do you make them feel? What emotions are you unlocking that are personal to them? It's like you've got to find these things out and then think about, hey, listen, I know that you like root beer. I went ahead and stocked the fridge with root beer. So, while we're having our, half a day long interview session, you got plenty of root beer. I got you covered. So, it's the thought, like that's nothing. It's okay. So you went to Costco and bought a 6-pack of root beer, but it's not that. It's that you actually thought about them and thought about what they want, and that's the stuff that you unlock. And again, very hard to do this as batch. This is individual, personal, one by one. And I think the English call it bespoke. But it's just here I'm going to create an experience for you, and just for you only. It's just going to fit you like a glove. And again, very different from millennials and previous generations. So again, I'll stop down real quick here. Questions are great, during the webinar, after the webinar, whatever. I just want to make sure that I give you opportunity if you need it. But the differences between Gen Z and millennials is it's nuanced. And we're going to discover more nuances as they grow, right? We got 23 to 8. Or 8 to 23. So there's a lot of growing to go, and which means there's going to be a lot of research. We're going to find out a lot more about this group of people. So we already know that they're independent, right? You already know that they've grown up with entrepreneurial people around them, and they've seen things could go from really small to really big. Like for my boys is my Minecraft. It was a game that just a couple kids at school played and interacted with, and now, or over the course of years, everyone at school interacted with it, and people had servers and people had tutors and all kinds of stuff. So it's seen all that kind of evolution of entrepreneurial stuff, products and services and whatnot. Gen Z, because of back to the digital native thing, they want to know inside your environment that they can iterate and experiment. And that's something that's different than millennials. Millennials didn't really ask for that question. They didn't really ask for that type of stuff or need that type of stuff, but this group does. I put cyberbullying in there just because I want you to kind of have a mental note because they're digital natives and they lived with the internet all this time. They also understand that there's negatives on the internet. There's negatives in social. There's negatives, and some of that comes back to experiences that they had as being bullied. So we got to think about that. Now, the last two bullet points are gonna freak you out a little bit. So I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on it, but I hope you got the pun in that. Millennials, 12-second attention span. Gen Z, 8 seconds. So how does that change our sourcing of this talent, the marketing of this talent, the employer brand, career pages, our communication, like all that stuff? Their attention span is just, you got to get there, son. We don't need a lot of adjectives. It's just 8 seconds. So that's some of the differences. And then let's take a look at some of the other differences. Again, they've got great research skills. I don't think that's their skills are better. That's the bit. Like millennials have research skills, but theirs are just better because they've never not had them. They're oddly a bit more risk averse, which is interesting, and they prefer person-to-person kind of meetings and contact. And then the digital stuff will happen. They know that a conversation will take place and have many forms, but they kind of like the humanity. And I think we're going through a wave of coming back to, yeah, you know what, let's go have coffee and talk. And then, yeah, we'll do all the other stuff after that. But let's actually connect in a humane, not a humane, in a human way. The last part, very interesting to me, is that they have a healthy skepticism, if there is such a thing, because being on the internet for so long, they've seen, I'm not going to say fake news, they've seen things that have been photoshopped. They've seen pranks. They've seen, all that stuff. So they kind of treat stuff like, let me see if this is real. And that's different. That's different than millennials. That's different than all the previous generations. They've got a healthy skepticism to things that happen on the internet. And let's deal with some of the takeaways. Now, these we'll spend, I think we've got a good 10 minutes left. I'm going to try and take us all the way to the end as best I can. But these are the things I really want y'all to take away from this time that we've had together. So let's just start with some of the basics. Start experimenting with this group. Like again, nothing's cast in stone. We're going to learn a lot about this group over the next 10 years or so. But just start experimenting. Personalization, you get it. Another thing to do in the interview process is to have another kind of Gen Z person. Very important to them, for them to see somebody like them. And different than previous generations to some degree, but they want to see that you've already recruited people like them. You know the attention span, 8 seconds, get to it, respect it. Flexible work, training, exceptional candidate experience. Again, now this changes this attention span thing. This changes our candidate experience in mammoth ways. Them reading a 1,000-word blog post, that's not going to happen, period. So creating 1,000-word blog post about the company is like, stop that. 300-word blog post. That's kind of where that needs to be for 8 seconds. They'll go further, but they're going to give you 8 seconds. That's the average attention span. And again, the last bullet point, they do care about, like millennials in a way, they care about purpose. So you've got to actually, it's not just a pure capitalism bit. You've got to actually show them that, we've got some other things that we care about. We donate to this. We volunteer here. That's where volunteer software kind of makes a lot of sense. Celebrate their independence, and just embrace and engage their entrepreneurial spirit. That they're going to have it, so you may as well figure it out for the company. Try to see the world through their eyes, and a lot of that is asking questions and listening. Again, like great recruiters do, they want to listen. They want to find out what really is important to this candidate, so that they can make sure that they can make a good fit. Because there's no need to waste anybody's time if the fit's just not there. This is a group that you want to go do your employer branding sooner. It's kind of like why McDonald's has the children's meals, is because they want you to be a McDonald's customer for life, right? So similar but different. Your employer branding should start sooner with this group, like freshmen, or maybe high school. Start putting your brand in front of younger talent, because some of these people in Gen Z are foregoing college to go straight into the workforce, and so to this group, they've seen college debt, they've seen from previous generations, they've seen all that stuff. And there's part of them are going to go to college and go that path. And there's a large percent of them, because of the entrepreneurial spirit, that are just going to look at that and go, nah, I'm gonna go do it. I'm gonna go work for a company for a year and a half, and I'm gonna start my own shop. And so that means we got to start earlier than we probably previously have thought about. Creating kind of a challenging, rewarding environment. Again, that's important. I think it's important to everybody, but for this group, it's really important. And again, the last point, a clear process where they can grow. You know, and this kind of deals with individualism. This deals with this entrepreneurial spirit, but you want them to come in and then be able to blossom and do other things with your firm. And so that's important. So these are things that as recruiters we should be talking to them about. It's like, hey, listen, I get it. You're individual. You're you. There's only one you. You are a snowflake. Like, and I get it. And everything needs to be personalized to you. Got it. Check. And you want to be more entrepreneurial. You want your ideas listened to and actioned. Get it. Like having those discussions with candidates, you know, maybe using different words, but having those conversations, that's the job now with this generation. It's different, and so we've adapted as recruiters, 180 different times. So we're going to adapt to this generation, and as this generation grows and changes, we're going to adapt to it as well. But those are the takeaways, and here. I want to throw up a little quote from GenZ. I appreciate that y'all carved out some time today for me, and I hope you learned something. It's important to me that you did and learn something. As I said before, I'm all over the internet, turns out, but this has all my, as you download the slides, you've got all my contact information. And where I'm at on the internet, etc. So it's easy to find me. Again, send me an email, however you want to communicate. It doesn't matter. I'm really comfortable with whatever. But really, thanks for your time. I appreciate y'all coming out and attending this webinar. And I hope it was a good experience for you.
Awesome, William. Thank you so much for everything today. Awesome little thing to leave everyone with, too. So at this time, let's go ahead and get into some questions. I think we might have time for one, maybe two. We've just got about 3 more minutes. So we'll take a question from Olivia. And she wants to know, William, if you think that they like the personal interaction because it actually is personal. Like, for instance, you chose them to talk to.
That's right. That's spot on. That's exactly right. They can get all the other, but the fact that you picked them and you personalized to them, that really unlocks something for them. That's spot on.
All right, awesome. Good job there, Olivia. We'll take one more question. This one comes from Williams, and Williams asks, how do you speak to the training piece if the organization does not spend the time or money on the formal training programs?
Quit, get another job. And I'm being literal, not sarcastic. And sometimes it's hard you're not going to get the candidates. You can't recruit millennials if you don't have training. And you're not going to be able to get Gen Z if you don't have training. And it's a different type of training with Gen Z. So if your company doesn't, first of all, if your company doesn't respect training and making people better, there's that old cliche of the CEO cliche that says, what if we train them and they leave? And it's more, what if we don't train them and they stay? You bring it up. Like first things first. Bring it up. Talk to HR and say, hey, listen, we're getting crushed out here because we can't recruit the talent you want us to recruit because they're looking for skills development. And if we don't provide it, they're just going to the next firm that does. And if they don't listen to you, which they should, recruiting is the most difficult job in HR. They should listen to you. But if they don't listen to you, get another job.
All right, there you go. We'll let that piece of advice take us to the end of our material for the day. One more big thank you to Glassdoor for helping us out and for William for being here for the presentation. Quick reminder to everyone, today's webcast has been approved for HR, CI, and SHRM credit. You can give us about 24 hours and then head on over to your My HCI profile online. Hover over the drop-down menu and then visit your My Learning Journey. So for all of us here at HCI, thanks for being here. We will see you next time.